I have Dave Franco's bust sticking out of my wall there.
That's
And there's
amazing.
rods at the bottom of that so you can articulate it to move his jaw around. And there's a little tube down the bottom that you blow into, which makes his throat kind of swell. There's a bladder in his throat. And, this wide angle doesn't do it justice. It is so scarily realistic. And it's in the film for like 1.5 seconds. I'm trying to identify everybody in your background, which I'm sure everybody does when you zoom
I,
them.
I got Elm Street 2 Freddy, I got
Mhm.
Terminator, I got Gremlin, I
I've
got
got
a
Small Soldier
original
there.
mate. This is just 80s, 90s goodness right here.
Yeah, I was recently on the same beach as Billy Zane, and I really regret not going up and being like, "Hey, I really loved the Phantom when I was a kid." And I see you've got
Or
the
just a Titanic quote, either one.
oh yeah, but no, the Phantom was my jam. I remember going to Movie World in Queensland, and they had like so a guy dressed as the Phantom, and
Mm.
he had the big dog. And my brother, who's older than me, bullied me into like giving him the middle finger, and then came up to me afterwards, and was like, "Michael, the Phantom saw that you gave him the middle finger, and he's set his dogs to come and kill you." And then I was crying at Movie World.
That's the ultimate power move right there to give the Phantom, to flip off the
Yeah,
Phantom,
the
man.
ghost who walks, walk
Yeah,
this
that's it.
bitch.
Well, mate, thank you for your time this morning.
Hey, my
Watched the
pleasure.
film a couple of days ago. It was a nice little treat, a nice little surprise. And I said in my review, I heard it doing the rounds here and there, and it was on my radar. But it's just a good, nice piece of body horror, which I love.
Oh, thank you.
Now, you were a kid of the 80s and 90s, yes?
Well, child of the 90s, but a big fan of the 80s and 90s in terms of, the filmmaking of that era.
Yeah, yeah. Same here, man. Child of the 90s, but go back to, the Elm Street series, Friday the 13th, Halloween,
Hmm.
all that stuff. Going back to like the 80s, like for you, was there anything that you'd watch body horror wise and kind of lock little things away to kind of maybe have for inspiration when you wrote together?
Well, definitely, like things like The Thing is, one of my favorite
Mm.
movies of all time. I'm always drawn to films that, obviously, films that have like great narratives and really like kind of relatable themes and emotions. But as kind of a technical guy, I also really like films that have all of that under the surface, but that you can have something that's kind of like complicated. Where like I knew writing this, so like I want to make something where we force people to make like puppets and prosthetics and kind of nasty things.
Mm.
So really influenced by things like The Thing and Rob Boutin's work on that. Anything Tom Savini touched, but in terms of body horror, Cronenberg, the Fly is probably the closest to this because it's, his other films are wonderful, but have such like a cold and kind of intellectual rigor to them. And I was kind of more interested in something that was a bit more of a thrill ride towards the end, even though making sure as well that the kind of romantic relationship felt kind of true and emotive.
Yeah, and that's actually the way you just worded that is a perfect segue because I like there's that underlying theme of do we rely on our partner too much and get a bit too full on.
Mm,
But, nice little neat bit of pub trivia with this film is you have a real life married couple as your leads, like, having
yeah.
Dave and Allison being a real life couple. In a way, as a director, does that make it a case of one less thing for directorial duty, one less thing to worry about because your leads already have that pre-existing chemistry, or in the case of their characters in the film, the lack of. But what was
Yeah.
that like having an already married couple? Was that a lot easier with?
I think it would have been impossible to do without that because
Mm,
this is for as ambitious and as like kind of the scale of this film is hopefully it feels like a much bigger budget film than it was, but we had very little money, very few resources to make this film, which means on a practical level we had a very few days. We needed 21 days to shoot this film. And in this film, we need our lead actors to be incredibly emotionally intimate and incredibly physically intimate. And so to
mm,
have that shorthand of these actors who have been in a relationship for over 10 years, they are so comfortable being vulnerable in front of one another. At the end of every day, they would go home and presumably run lines together. Like it
yeah.
it was it had this great shorthand, but also we were asking them to do things that you could never ask actors that aren't in a relationship to do. We had a whole day where they had to be basically fully nude in front of the camera together just for a whole day because it was a really technical sequence that we were doing. We had days where they were literally stuck with prosthetics, so they were like fused to one another with prosthetics that we didn't have a budget to replace. So we couldn't, once you put on a prosthetic, you can't take it off without destroying it. So they would spend a whole day fused together where they would just have to go to the bathroom together. Like there was no way around it. And you couldn't ask actors to do that, but they were the leads and they're married and they were producers on the film. And once we realized, oh, that's how it's going to be, they were like, yeah, of course, no worries about it. If this film had actors who like didn't get on, it would have been a disaster. Like we literally would never have been able to finish it.
Yeah, 100%, man. It just would have made the whole process just probably a lot more slower. And my final question, man, I obviously I've got to nerd out over some
Mhm.
practical effects because if you haven't noticed from my background, I do dabble a lot in it, the prop making side and stuff
Hell
like
yeah.
that. So, talking about Rob Bottin and all that beautiful stuff, there's some beautiful practical effects in here. And like you mentioned, Cronenberg's The Fly, like a lot of slimy, disgusting stuff, which is beautiful. Like it takes a village of people to make this stuff, but at the same time, it's paired and complemented with some beautiful VFX. Was from is it Rise who did the VFX?
Yeah, Rise is a company in Germany that did some of the visual effects. Our most high-end visual effects were done by Framestore, like the most complicated stuff, Framestore Melbourne, which
Yep.
was great. And then the rest of the visual effects were done by me because we didn't have a budget to do
No
anymore. And I
way.
have a background in that, so I did 130 VFX shots on the film, something like that. But then, like then Rise and Framestore would come in and do the much more complicated stuff. But again, being really low budget, we have to be so tricky. We're to be so clever, and shout out to our VFX supervisor Genevieve Camilleri for being so clever with our budget and putting it to the best resources. And at the end of the day, there were all these other shots that needed to be done, and I didn't want to cut any sequences from the script because I thought, this is the one chance to make this movie. So I was just very happy to kind of take over some of that VFX work for free. But on the prosthetic stuff, yeah, we've got amazing prosthetics in this film. We've got Larry Van Donovan, our prosthetics supervisor, like the head of the prosthetics team, did amazing stuff. I have Dave Franco's bust sticking out of my wall there.
That's
And there's
amazing.
rods at the bottom of that so you can articulate it to move his jaw around. And there's a little tube down the bottom that you blow into, which makes his throat kind of swell. There's a bladder in his throat. And, this wide angle doesn't do it justice. It is so scarily realistic. And it's in the film for like 1.5 seconds. It's
Mm,
insane.
mm.
But we've also got some more prosthetics that I've stolen from the film that I can't show because they're too spoilery. But
Yep.
like as somebody who comes from a visual effectsy background, I love VFX, but I was so excited for the practical effects because I don't understand how they work. It's like a
Mm.
magic trick to me. So there is one character who we kind of find in a state of decomposition at a certain point, and I was like, "Can I be that character?" So my little director's cameo, like I got to go in and they did the full, mold of my shoulders up to my head, and they recreated my head, and I had to, spend 90 minutes just covered in goo so that they could create me, and then.
Yeah.
It's so fun going through that process because they have this book of skin and they're like, which tone of skin are you? And they're like
It's like
holding up
carpet
these
samples.
skin samples. Yeah, it's awful. It's wonderful. Though
So wait,
I
if
was
it's the
about the
one I'm
palest skin
thinking
that
of,
they
and
had.
obviously no spoiler, if it's the one
Mhm.
I'm thinking of, that's you.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That's
That's
my little
amazing.
cameo, which is fun.
Oh, I
They,
love
they
that, man.
they
So
made me feel a little self-conscious about like matching all the grays that are coming through on the side of my hair, but
I feel you, man. It's
happens to
fine.
us
Just
all.
just embrace the salt and pepper. So I'm assuming that it was one of those things where a priority to keep it as practical as possible, but also complementing it with VFX.
Absolutely. Almost every gag has a practical basis, but there's some very extreme, shall we say, kind of transformation elements whereby visual effects were just from the get-go, we just knew that that was the solution for some of those stuff because kind of animating bones under skin can sometimes
Mm,
be tricky with a practical thing on a kind of large scale that we're doing. But
yeah.
yeah, like, and it was, always practical basis, but then it'd be things like realizing that when you put a prosthetic on at the beginning of the day, 3 hours after shooting, it's kind of started to fall apart often because it's really tender. So that then you would just go into visual effects and just kind of like cut out the hole and, like smooth that bit over. That was the sort of visual effects that I was doing, just kind of smoothing out the edges of stuff. But yeah, it was amazing. Like, it's so amazing to actually have something there on the day. Like I've said this before, but one of the things that was wonderful about the shoot is you'd shoot like a normal scene, just like people having dinner at the start of the day, and then we'd have our
Mm.
lunch break, and then like it would be like bring out the puppet, bring out the practical thing, and just everybody on the crew lights up. These are people that make films all year round. They've been doing it forever, but when your actor comes down with some crazy prosthetic on, everybody goes like, "Oh man, that's cool."
It definitely lightens the mood considering, like, especially if you're filming a heavy scene, and there are like heavy scenes of violence and pain, and
Mm.
Dave and Allison do a great job at, really pushing that out there and having it kind of almost bleed through the frames. But there's also the levity of comedy in this film, and I'm just going to end on this, mate. You've ruined the Spice Girls song "To Become One" for me, so
Hell
thanks
yeah.
for that. But yeah, just those little pockets of comedy added just this weird, disturbing bit of comedic levity to something so horrific going on. But yeah, man, just a massive congratulations.
Hey,
Again, this was
thank
a
you.
nice little surprise of a film for me, and I'd heard it doing the rounds. So, I appreciate your time this morning and, getting to nerd out over some good old practical effects.
Hey, no, my pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm glad you like the movie. I like it too.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad to hear. I'm just, now just picturing you inviting guests over for dinner and showing them, behold, my Dave Franco wall puppet.
Yes, I do that literally to everybody who comes in. If like I need an electrician because something broke in my house, I'm like, yeah, you want to see something cool? Come check out this out.
Just runs out. He's never coming back.
Yeah.
Awesome, Michael. Thanks very much, mate, and all the
Hey,
best. Appreciate
thanks,
it.
dude. Appreciate it.